Justin, I got the platinum for Last of Us Part 1.
Ooh.
Just had to go back, go listen to two of Ellie's jokes once again. I listened to them all as I was playing through, as I talked about last week. Popped after the second joke, and I was happy because it meant I didn't have to replay another 2-hour-long section. So I got that, and then I booted up Last of Us Part 2.
And
I'm midway through day 1 Seattle as Ellie.
And
this game is as good as it ever has been. Damn.
Having played Last of Us Part 1, have your thoughts on it kind of changed at all? Is it like significantly better still? Is it less better? What is your like journey now going from Part 1 to Part 2?
It's one of those things where like I think Part 2 is better in my opinion. I think Part 1 is like a 10 out of 10. I think Part 2 is also a 10 out of 10. So like just like let that be what it is.
It's like a lesser 10 out of 10.
I mean, it's like I just prefer the emotional beats of Part 2 to Part 1. I don't dislike Part 1. I think it's still awesome, but I think like not that I think Ellie's story is relatable in its like literal sense, but like I mean I've said everything I have to ever say about this game over the past 2 years, but like I'll say it again. I think that there's something so profoundly tragic about the way that Ellie was raised by Joel, where she doesn't know how to express that something's wrong, because Joel was not a person who ever talked about anything that was wrong, never talked about emotions. I mean, like he did a little bit towards the end, but like as you see, even towards the end of that game, there's like a little optional conversation where you can have about, there's like a really small grave that you find on the side of the road, and you can talk to Ellie about it, and Ellie's like, oh, that's really sad, and Joel basically says like, that's too small a grave, basically implying like this is a child that died. And she says like, oh shit, like I meant to leave that toy robot that I picked up for Sam, the kid that gets bit and has the brother that you guys find that they both die. She's like, I meant to leave that at his grave. And Joel is basically like, we're not talking about this. And she's like, I want to talk about it. Like I have feelings about it. And he's like, we're not talking about it. And so it's just one of those things that's just like a small little moment from Part 1 that you see this, that's a seed, right? And that is fully bloomed in Part 2. There are all sorts of little details that are like planted in Part 1 that have bloomed fully in Part 2. And it's just so tragic because you see the way that this man treated this girl unknowingly, maybe, right? He didn't know that this would make her be like a reserved person who like just like bottled everything deep inside and wouldn't really like express it to other people. Like it's so tragic and it's so good. And that scene where it all goes down, the inciting incident, let's say, I've seen it maybe 10 times, not through playing, but like I've watched the scene a few times on YouTube and stuff, and like it never gets any easier. And every single time I get done watching it, or like in this time, experiencing it, like I've got like a stomach cramp and like there's like something wrong. Like I feel all like upset and everything in a way that I think is just like unlike really a whole lot of other stuff that I've experienced. It's a very powerful, moving piece.
I think what you said was I think like, how are they both 10s if Part 2 is such like a better game? I think it makes sense to me because I feel like, and correct me if I'm wrong, because you played this more recently than I did. Last of Us Part 1 is a very like clear story.
It is like very cut and dry. It's very easy to understand. It's very easy to like, you get every single piece of it through watching it and playing it.
Yeah.
Like really no ambiguity.
The Last of Us Part 2 is like the deep layers of things. The story itself is, I guess, kind of basic, but really not. But it's like all the complex parts of it. It's messy. It's like that one thing us English teachers like to talk about, that like iceberg image. Like it's like what you have on the surface versus like there's more below the surface of the water. And like The Last of Us Part 1 is that top part. It's there. You see what it is. You know what it is. It's good. It's what, I guess an iceberg is not good, but like it's there. And then below it is what The Last of Us Part 2 is. It's all of that other stuff. It's finishing that story. It's all the complex emotions that first part kind of created. And that's why I think it's cool that they named it Part 1 and Part 2, because it's like the same story or the same parts of the story. It's just dealing with all of the other layers of it in such a cool way.
Part 1 is the foundation of Part 2, and I think Part 2 is just so like, it's so good. It's so sad. I interrupted myself earlier, I think, and like Ellie's story, I don't think like literally is relatable at all. No one's ever killed my pseudo dad, you know. And if they did, I don't think I would do what Ellie does. But like, I think the emotions of like this horrible thing happened and I don't know how to talk about it. And like, I just don't know how to express myself and make myself feel better and be able to like work through these feelings. Like, I've been there, man. I feel like that's a very relatable thing, right? Like, I've been where Ellie's been, where I'm like, where you're destructive, right? And you're sitting there and you're like, Ellie, come back. Please, like, come back from this. And she just can't. She just can't let it go because she doesn't know what else to do. She's like, this is all, like I don't know how to make myself feel better, so I guess I'll just do the thing that, like, makes sense to do. And she's, like, trying to psych herself up into being this monster, and she's not until she is. Until, like, it really, like, comes around. And, like, damn, it's so good. And the visuals of part 1 just perfectly in line with
transition into part 2.
You'd think you're playing the same game.
Yeah.
It's really that good. So there you go. That's my review. Pretty good.
You know, we should make a podcast to just talk about it, you know?
And that's the thing, man. Like, I look back at this and like I'm playing it for the first time since playing it way back when. And it's just like I remember so much about it. And I remember just like playing through this and like thinking like having so much to say and being like, I want to talk about this with someone. And then you texted me, I was in the Badlands in South Dakota. And you were like, hey, so when are we doing a podcast? And I was like, let's do it. Let's do it.
And then 111 weeks later.